No story about Farmland Reserve would be complete without Deseret Ranches in Central Florida, a ranch so large and storied that locals simply call it the Mormon Ranch. This is the flagship of the church's ranching operations and one of the largest cow-calf ranches in the United States. But in 1950, Deseret Ranch was just a rough expanse of Florida scrub and swamp in Osceola, Orange, and Brevard counties. How it became a cattle empire is a classic cowboy tale, vision, and hard work. It began in the late 1940s when a prominent church leader, Henry D. Moyle, scouted the southeastern U.S. for potential agricultural investments. The church had small farms elsewhere for welfare needs and saw promise in acquiring a large ranch that could both generate income and provide food in emergencies. In 1949, Moyle's associate Heber Meeks identified roughly 50,000 acres of cut-over timberland in central Florida, mostly depleted pine forest, swamps, and palmetto scrub being sold by a timber company. It was hardly prime ranch land. The soil was poor, much of the area was underwater part of the year, and there were almost no fences, roads, or buildings aside from a few shacks on a former homestead. Yet Moyle had a pioneer's vision. In 1950, the church purchased the first parcel of what would become Deseret Ranch, and within 2 years assembled over 220,000 acres, an area nearly the size of New York City, as the core of the ranch. Transforming this wild Florida expanse into a working ranch was a massive challenge. The property could not be operated in the same manner as a Western cattle ranch, early managers noted. So they sought advice from local Florida cattlemen and scientists. They basically had to build a ranch from scratch. Hundreds of miles of fencing were strung across the flatlands, dirt roads were improved or carved out, over 200 miles of ranch roads to traverse the vast property. Crucially, an extensive system of canals and ditches was dug to drain off excess water from summer rains and to irrigate during dry periods. The land itself needed rejuvenation. Crews cleared palmetto scrub and tree stumps, plowed and limed the acidic soil, and seeded improved pasture grasses in place of the sparse native wiregrass. Perhaps the toughest problem was the cattle themselves. The local Florida cracker cattle in the 1950s were a scrappy breed, small, tick-ridden cows left over from Spanish colonial herds. They weighed under 700 pounds on average, had very low fertility, only about 25% calving rates, and produced tiny calves. To build a profitable herd, Deseret's managers embarked on an ambitious breeding program. They bought 3,000 head of those native cows from a local rancher and ended up rounding up 7,000. The Florida free-range cattle were so scattered, he undercounted his own herd. Then they brought in 400 bulls from Texas, likely sturdier Hereford and Angus stock, to crossbreed and improve the genetics. Over time, Deseret Ranch developed cattle suited for Florida's hot and humid climate, Brahman Angus crossbreeds that could tolerate heat and resist parasites, yet still produce heavy calves. This was a pioneering effort in the days before such crossbreeds were common in the Southeast.
To run this enormous ranch, the church recruited experienced ranching families, some from western states like Utah and others native to Florida, to relocate to the property in the 1950s. Many of those families put down roots. Today, third-generation descendants of the original ranch hands still work on Deseret Ranch. The ranch community grew to include about 90 rancher families living on the property, forming a tight-knit cowboy town in the middle of Florida. As the ranch expanded, eventually reaching roughly 300,000 acres by the 2000s, it was divided into more than a dozen cattle management units, each with its own cowboys and pastures. In total, around 42,500 breeding cows roam Deseret Ranch today, an operation so large that each of its 3,100 cow units would be a big ranch on its own, as one account noted. Those cows produce some 36,000 calves each year, making Deseret Ranch arguably the most productive cow-calf enterprise in the nation. What makes Deseret Ranch unique is its diversity of operations. While cattle is the core business, the ranch also cultivates 25,000 acres of citrus groves, earning it the full name, Deseret Cattle and Citrus. manages timber tracts and sod farms, and even runs a mine extracting fossilized seashell material used to make road-based gravel. In recent years, large solar energy farms have been set up on parts of the ranch land, generating renewable power and additional revenue. The ranch's sheer size, nearly 50 miles by 30 miles across, has made the LDS Church the largest private landowner in Florida, owning about 2% of the entire state's landmass. To put it in perspective, Deseret Ranch is 10 times the size of Walt Disney World and significantly predates the theme park in Central Florida. Located just east of fast-growing Orlando and stretching west of Kennedy Space Center, this vast green ranch has also served as a buffer against urban sprawl. Longtime Floridians note that the Mormon Ranch is one reason much of that region remains undeveloped Old Florida, a patch of open range amid sprawling suburbs. After over 7 decades, Deseret Ranches has earned a respected place in the ranching world. It's recognized as one of the largest and most productive ranches in America. Modern Deseret Ranch managers emphasize sustainable practices, balancing cattle grazing with wildlife habitat, rotating pastures, and safeguarding water resources for Greater Orlando. The ranch has even been acknowledged for its role in regional water management. In one case, the church had to assert its rights to a reservoir on the property, Taylor Creek Reservoir, in court, prevailing in 2010 to ensure the ranch's water usage was protected. The workforce remains a mix of seasoned cowboys and agricultural professionals. About 80 full-time employees run the ranch's daily operations now, in addition to the ranch families. They take pride in values of hard work, community service, and innovation that have defined the ranch since the 1950s. In short, Deseret Ranches stands as a testament to the LDS Church's successful fusion of cowboy heritage and church investment savvy, a place where Stetson-hatted cattlemen ride herd on assets owned by a global faith. Having established a major foothold in Florida, the church, through Farmland Reserve and Ag Reserves, didn't stop there. Over the ensuing decades, it quietly expanded its agricultural holdings across the United States and into other countries. By reinvesting profits and capital into more land, Farmland Reserve has built up an extensive portfolio of farms and ranches that few realize are connected to the LDS Church. As of the mid-2020s, the church, via its affiliated entities, is estimated to own around 1.7 million acres of agricultural land in the United States alone, and on the order of 2.5 million acres worldwide when including international holdings. This makes it an agricultural titan. One analysis ranked the church as the 5th largest private landowner in the U.S., just behind a few timber companies and the Nature Conservancy. Let's tour some of the notable pieces of this empire. Nebraska, Sandhills Ranches, Rex Ranch. In the remote sandhills of western Nebraska, Farmland Reserve owns a colossal stretch of rangeland that locals know as Rex Ranch. Starting in the 1990s, the church began buying up ranchland in Nebraska, taking advantage of sales by local owners. Over 30-plus years, it amassed approximately 365,000 acres spread across Garden, Grant, Hooker, Morrill, Sheridan, and neighboring counties. This includes the historic Rex Ranch properties. To Nebraskans, the scale was almost hidden. Even the state's Farmers Union president admitted he'd only heard rumors the Mormons owned a lot of land out there, not realizing one owner controlled so much. By 2023, Farmland Reserve had become the single largest buyer of Nebraska farmland over the prior 5 years, outpacing even well-known investors. With about 370,000 acres total, the church's holdings in Nebraska are nearing those of billionaire Ted Turner, long the state's top landowner. The Nebraska ranching operations are managed by Ag Reserves, which leases the land from Farmland Reserve now that state law allows corporate farming. Rex Ranch itself is a giant cow-calf outfit comparable to Deseret Ranch in size, roughly 365,000 acres of grazing land supporting thousands of cattle. Despite its enormity, it blends into the Nebraska prairie, and the church has kept a low profile there. The ranch employs local ranch hands and is deeply involved in the community, With employees participating in the Nebraska Cattlemen's Association, the beef from Rex Ranch serves a dual purpose. Much of it is sold on the open market for profit, but a portion is set aside for the church's welfare system, charitable grocery stores for members. In this way, the Nebraska lands continue the tradition of combining business with benevolence. Notably, in a competitive 2021 auction, Farmland Reserve beat out an investment firm linked to Bill Gates to buy a large farming operation, 22,500-acre Easter Day Farms in Washington, a sign of how serious a player the church has become in U.S. agriculture. Oftentimes, observers talk about Bill Gates being the largest private farmland owner at 269,000 acres, but the LDS Church's holdings through Farmland Reserve have well eclipsed that. Oklahoma, Osage County Ranch. In Oklahoma's Osage County, famous for its tall grass prairie, Farmland Reserve owns about 51,600 acres. This land was noted in public records around 2008 and likely operates as cattle pasture. The Osage Ranch, together with holdings in states like Texas, Oregon, and others, adds to a patchwork of ranches across the West. Beyond ranches, Farmland Reserve, via ag reserves, also runs extensive farms growing row crops, grains, vegetables, and permanent crops, fruits and nuts. For example, the church owns farmland in Washington State's Columbia Basin, such as the Easter Day farms mentioned earlier, potatoes, onions, corn, wheat. In the Midwest and South, the 2024 purchase of 46 farms for $289 million expanded its row crop portfolio to places like Arkansas, Mississippi, the Carolinas, and Oklahoma, producing corn, soybeans, cotton, rice, peanuts, and more. In California's Central Valley, Ag Reserves manages almond, pistachio, walnut, and citrus orchards. In fact, the church is believed to be the largest producer of almonds and pistachios in the U.S. thanks to those holdings. There are also church-owned vineyards and vegetable farms. Much of this produce finds its way into the church's welfare supply chain. For instance, the LDS Church is reputed to be one of the largest potato growers in America, with potatoes from church farms processed into canned goods for humanitarian relief and storehouse distribution. International farmlands. Farmland Reserve's reach goes global. In the mid-1990s, the church began investing in prime farmland in the United Kingdom. Starting around 1995, it quietly bought some of the most fertile farms in England's East Anglia region. By 2001, the LDS Church had acquired about 15,000 acres in Britain, making it the largest foreign owner of UK agricultural land at the time. These UK farms, managed under a subsidiary called Farmland Reserve UK Ltd, grow wheat and sugar beets among other crops, and profits from them have been used to fund church humanitarian projects in Africa. Chris Jolliffe, who the manager of the UK operations, explained that while some of the British harvest, like wheat, is shipped to relieve hunger in developing countries, other crops are sold for profit, and the money is sent to support charitable work in places like Ethiopia and Kenya. Moving to Latin America, the church also owns extensive lands in Brazil, Argentina, Chile, and Mexico. In Brazil alone, roughly 250,000 acres of farms and ranches were noted as part of the portfolio as of 2024. In Argentina and other South American countries, the church similarly operates ranches and farms, partly to support local church welfare needs in those regions.
In recent years, Farmland Reserve has even ventured into the Southern Hemisphere. In 2024, news broke that the church's ag investment arm, through an Australian subsidiary, sometimes referred to as Alkira Farms, spent over $300 million to acquire about 26,000 hectares of farmland in Australia. That's around 64,000 acres in one deal, likely high-quality cropping land. This was part of a broader trend of North American investors seeing Australian farmland as undervalued, and the Mormon Church joined a $1.1 billion push into Aussie agriculture along with other institutional buyers. The purchased holdings included large grain-growing estates, such as the Worrell Creek aggregation in New South Wales. With that move, the LDS Church signaled it is willing to extend its farming footprint to virtually every continent where opportunities arise. In summary, from the cattle pastures of the American West and Midwest to the row crop bread baskets of the South, and from British cornfields to Brazilian ranches, Farmland Reserve has assembled a truly global agricultural network. It operates in over 30 U.S. states and at least 7 other countries. The scale is vast, yet the strategy is simple. Invest in productive land, manage it for sustainable yields, and use the returns to support the church's mission. In many places, the church's farming enterprise flies under the radar by design, often operated under different local company names. But every so often, it pops up in headlines, for instance, when a massive farm sale is attributed to the LDS Church's affiliate. This discretion is partly cultural, Mormons value humility and service, and partly structural, as religious organizations aren't required to publicly report assets like a corporation would. However, as one analyst put it, people might know the church owns a lot of land, but don't really have a grasp of how vast it is. From a financial perspective, Farmland Reserve's portfolio has grown into a multi-billion-dollar asset. Landgate's analysis in 2022 estimated the church's U.S. agricultural land was worth around $16 billion. Some individual properties are worth nearly $1 billion alone. For instance, Deseret Ranches, with its cattle, citrus, and future development potential, was valued around $868 million in the late 2000s. And Nebraska's Rex Ranch and Florida Timberlands were each pegged near $1 billion in value in recent tallies. The church's farmland investments have proven to be stable and appreciating assets, validating President Hinckley's foresight that good farms preserve and enhance wealth over time. In an age when stocks can crash and currencies inflate, owning fertile land provides a literal ground to stand on. This financial strength, in turn, underpins the church's ability to fund its religious and charitable work. As Farmland Reserve CEO Doug Rose stated, the returns from these agricultural investments go to support the church's mission, from building temples and schools to humanitarian aid worldwide. The ranches and farms under Farmland Reserve are not just large in acreage, they're highly productive. Deseret Ranch, for example, has been called the most productive cow-calf ranch in the U.S., with calf production rates that far exceed the national average thanks to intensive herd management and improved pastures. On the farming side, church-owned lands produce a cornucopia of goods. Grains like corn, wheat, and rice, oil crops like soy, over 250,000 citrus trees in Florida, tree nuts in California, and specialty crops like pecans, olives, onions, potatoes, even raisins for cereal and grapes for juice. The church's farms have at times ranked among top producers. For example, one report noted the church was believed to be the largest almond and pistachio producer in the U.S. and a major player in potato farming. Such output requires modern, efficient farming techniques. Farmland Reserve has embraced technology and research. It collaborates with universities, like the University of Florida, for cattle genetics and forage research, employs soil and water conservation practices, and lately invests in renewable energy on its lands, like the solar farms on Deseret Ranch. The emphasis on sustainability is evident. At Deseret, for instance, they center efforts on environmental stewardship, animal welfare, and community impact as key pillars. Even without government farm subsidies, which they do not take, the operations remain profitable and progressive.
Farmland Reserve's operations have become fixtures in their local communities, often providing jobs and supporting rural economies. The church tends to hire locally for its farms, and many employees are not church members. They simply appreciate steady work on a well-run operation. In Nebraska, Rex Ranch sources over 90% of its supplies from local businesses, boosting the regional economy. The employees volunteer at county fairs and rancher cooperatives, integrating into the community. In Florida, Deseret Ranch is an equal opportunity employer with a diverse staff, and it has trained generations of agricultural professionals. Some ranch managers trained at the King Ranch Institute in Texas have come to lead Deseret operations, creating cross-pollination of best practices. Farmland Reserve also leases some lands to small local farmers for their own operations, acting as a landlord that, by accounts, treats tenant farmers fairly and honestly. Farmland Reserve has even leased land for renewable energy development, wind and solar farms in partnership with communities, reflecting a willingness to diversify land use for broader benefit. All of this has earned the church a reputation among some agriculture circles as a best-in-class owner and ethical operator. As one Farming Read CEO said of a recent deal, Farmland Reserve is highly respected in the farmland community as a manager that deals honestly and ethically with its farmer tenants. Interestingly, an indirect achievement of Farmland Reserve's land holdings is the conservation of open space and wildlife habitat. Because the church holds land for the long term, often over decades or more, and doesn't sell off to the highest bidder, many of its acres have remained undeveloped green space in an era of rapid development. The Florida Ranch, as mentioned, kept a huge swath of Central Florida natural and undeveloped while Orlando ballooned nearby. In another example, the church's Ag Reserve subsidiary purchased 382,000 acres of timberland in the Florida Panhandle in 2013 from St. Joe Company. A few years later, in 2020, it sold 20,000 acres of sensitive wetlands from that tract to the Nature Conservancy, which then donated the land to the state of Florida for permanent preservation. This ensured those wetlands around Lake Wimico would be protected rather than logged or developed. In general, church farms often practice responsible stewardship. Deseret Ranch maintains large wetlands and wildlife refuges on its property, with areas like Jug Island and Woodstork rookeries set aside. The church's ethic land, rooted in a belief of being wise stewards of God's creations, means that although they utilize the land, they also take steps to sustain it for future generations. Running one of the world's largest agricultural enterprises hasn't been without challenges and controversies. Farmland Reserve and the LDS Church have encountered a variety of obstacles, some external, some internal, and have worked to overcome them. The initial development of Deseret Ranch in Florida was itself a monumental challenge. The team had to battle Florida's elements, heat, floods, mosquitoes, and muck to carve out a ranch. They overcame tropical diseases in cattle, engineered around swampy terrain, and survived setbacks like hurricanes. For instance, Florida ranchers must have plans for hurricanes. Deseret ensures cattle have high ground and shelters during storms. In the 1950s and 60s, overcoming the learning curve of East Coast ranching, so different from Utah or Wyoming, was a test of ingenuity. Their success is evidenced by the fact that by 2000, Deseret Ranch was shipping 16 million pounds of calves per year to market, worth about $16 million at the time, a far cry from the scraggly 700-pound cracker cows they started with. In communities where the church has bought a lot of land, not everyone is thrilled. Some Nebraska farmers, for example, have voiced concerns that the deep pockets of Farmland Reserve drive up land prices, making it harder for small local farmers to expand. The Nebraska Farmers Union president described the church as another out-of-state corporation, crowding out local ownership. Similarly, in the UK, some critics, like Friends of the Earth, complained that the church's farms weren't organic and that such wealthy owners should farm more environmentally or allow more public access. The church's approach to such criticism has been measured. They emphasize their positive contributions, jobs, taxes, community projects, and clarify their long-term, stewardship-minded intentions. In Nebraska, a spokesperson noted the church pays property and income taxes like any other operator. Religious ownership doesn't confer a tax break on actively farmed land or earned farm income. And because the church isn't a short-term investor, it isn't flipping land for profit, but holding it, often leasing it back to local farmers to work. In the UK's case, the church's farm manager responded that while organic methods were noble, their priority was maximizing yields to feed the hungry. Organic farming is too costly, and our chief concern is growing as much as possible for needy countries. They justified conventional methods as a practical choice to fulfill their humanitarian goals. As the church's wealth in land and otherwise has become more widely known, Farmland Reserve has faced scrutiny from media and ex-members demanding transparency.
Journalists have tried to tally the church's land assets, often with surprise at the sheer scale. Some watchdog groups estimate the church's total holdings, all real estate, not just farms, could exceed $100 billion in value. The church, being a religious institution, is not legally required to publish detailed financials, which occasionally leads to public pressure or even regulatory questions. In 2023, for instance, the church was fined by the U.S. SEC for not properly disclosing certain investment holdings, though that was about securities, not farmland. Farmland Reserve, as a private auxiliary, typically doesn't comment on acreage estimates or financial specifics. This lack of public disclosure can create an aura of mystery that sometimes breeds suspicion. Internally, however, the church maintains that it uses these investments for the good of the church and community, and it has started to share notable developments, like the 2024 farm purchases, with church-owned media to highlight positive impacts. The challenge going forward will be balancing the privacy the church prefers with the public's curiosity and sometimes concern about a faith-based entity owning so much land. A significant challenge is what to do with lands that have skyrocketed in value due to nearby development. Nowhere is this more acute than Deseret Ranch in Florida. That ranch sits next to Orlando, one of the fastest-growing metro areas in the country. Real estate developers salivate at the prospect of building on portions of the ranch. Over the years, there have been proposals and plans for big developments. In 2015, the church unveiled a sector plan that envisioned parts of the ranch eventually hosting new communities. One plan spoke of a future city for 500,000 people on a portion of the property. More recently, Farmland Reserve sought to annex 52,000 acres of its Florida ranch land into the city of Orlando, a move that would let the church coordinate future development under city infrastructure and zoning. This has sparked local opposition from environmentalists and some residents, who formed groups like Save Orange County to resist potential urban sprawl on ranch land. They worry that turning ranch land into suburbs could strain water supplies and destroy habitats. The church counters that any development would be master planned for sustainability, preserving large green corridors and using smart growth principles. In fact, the church's own plans emphasize balancing development with conservation, aiming to preserve as much natural and ranch land as possible, even as they eventually build on some sections. This tug-of-war between keeping the land ranching forever versus cashing in or accommodating regional growth is a challenge that will likely play out over decades. For now, Farmland Reserve has mostly kept things status quo, only selling a few peripheral pieces here and there, and that Orlando annexation request is still under negotiation. It's a delicate challenge, how to be a good steward of the land in a way that honors both the environment and the church's fiduciary interests. In some regions, the church had to navigate or help dismantle legal barriers to its farming. The prime example was Nebraska's Initiative 300, a state constitutional amendment that from 1982 to 2007 banned corporate farming. Farmland Reserve exploited a loophole since the law exempted nonprofit entities aimed more at blocking big agribusiness firms. By purchasing through its nonprofit entity, the church legally acquired over 200,000 acres in Nebraska while I-300 was in effect. Some might call that clever, others might say it skirted the spirit of the law, but either way, it was an example of overcoming a regulatory hurdle. When the law was struck down in 2007, the church was firmly entrenched as a major landowner. Elsewhere, foreign ownership laws can be a barrier. For instance, some countries limit how much land a foreign church or company can own. The church often sets up local companies, like in the UK and Australia, to comply with rules and stay under the radar. Adapting to each jurisdiction's regulations is an ongoing logistical challenge for Farmland Reserve's global operations.
Through all these challenges, one thing stands out. The LDS Church's agricultural ventures have staying power. They take a very long view, thinking in terms of generations. So far, this approach has helped them weather economic storms, criticism, and changing laws. Farmland Reserve's ability to be a long-term investor, as their CEO puts it, means they are often patient and deliberate rather than reactive. For instance, when a rezoning for development at Deseret Ranch faced pushback in 2008, the church simply withdrew the proposal, deciding it wasn't the right time.
the ranch kept ranching, and nothing was lost by waiting. That patience is a luxury not all companies have. But as a church auxiliary, Farmland Reserve isn't under pressure to deliver quarterly profits to shareholders. It can prioritize principles like self-reliance, community, and prudent growth, overcoming challenges at its own pace.
Building this agricultural empire has yielded some remarkable achievements for the LDS Church and its members. Perhaps the most important achievement is that these farms and ranches have greatly enhanced the church's ability to care for the needy. The LDS Church operates what may be the largest private welfare system in the world, and its farms are an integral part of it. Dozens of welfare farms produce dairy, poultry, grains, fruits, and vegetables that are canned or packaged in church facilities and distributed through bishop storehouses, free grocery centers for those in need. In a very real sense, Farmland Reserve's holdings form a food security reserve for the church's humanitarian efforts. During the COVID-19 pandemic, for example, church-owned farms supplied food pantries in relief efforts when supply chains were disrupted. And as noted earlier, after disasters like hurricanes, the church can quickly mobilize its stored food grown on its farms to send to affected communities. Even on the big commercial ranches like Deseret and Rex, a portion of the beef and other products is diverted into the welfare system to ensure church members and often their neighbors don't go hungry. This model of self-reliance and charity in tandem is a unique accomplishment, seldom seen on such a scale.
In the end, the saga of Farmland Reserve, Inc. is a fascinating intersection of faith, finance, and farming. Here is a global church, more often associated with missionaries in white shirts or genealogy libraries, that also happens to rank among the biggest ranchers and farmers on the planet. They own more cattle and cropland than many agribusiness corporations, yet they're not a household name in agriculture because they've operated so quietly. Their story is one of pioneering spirit. From the swamps of Florida to the plains of Nebraska, they took on projects that others might have deemed too difficult or too long-term, and made them thrive. It's also a story of purpose beyond profit. Unlike typical land barons, the LDS Church isn't just hoarding land for wealth's sake. Every acre has that dual purpose Hinckley described, to be productive and ready to feed people in times of need. Farmland Reserve stands as the mechanism by which the church can fulfill its ethic of preparedness and charity on a grand scale. For those who love cowboy culture and the romance of the ranch, it might be surprising that a church owns something like Deseret Ranch, where real-life cowboys saddle up at dawn to round up herds in the Florida mist. But as we've seen, the values that make a good rancher, hard work, stewardship, foresight, and community, align pretty well with the values the LDS Church teaches. Perhaps it's no coincidence that the church's symbol of industry is the beehive. Deseret means honeybee, and its flagship ranch carries that name. In the cowboy and farming operations of Farmland Reserve, we see those values in action. Land kept productive and safe, people and animals cared for, and the fruits of the earth shared to help others. As of today, Farmland Reserve, Inc. continues to invest and expand, carefully and quietly. It is leasing new farms, exploring sustainable farming methods, and training a new generation of ranch managers, many of whom rotate through different church-owned operations for experience. The legacy it's building is unique, a 21st century agricultural titan with a 19th century soul.